and we are going to start our meeting for this evening. So before we delve into the details of the session, I would like to go quickly through the housekeeping. Please make sure that your mics are muted during the session. If we might allow for some interaction, and in that case, we will request you to raise your hand before you unmute your mic to interact with the presenter. Make sure that you are putting your view into the speaker's view. And if we allow for interactions, please make sure that only one person talks at a time. You can choose to keep your camera on or off. The session is recorded, so if you don't want your stuff to be recorded, you can choose to switch it off. You may also type your questions or feedbacks into the chat room. So my colleague Valentine is going to help on that, and he's going to manage the Q&A session as well. So make sure that if you have any comments or questions or anything, please put them in the chat box. So with that, I would like to introduce the session of this evening. The session is on a very important issue, which is anxiety and workplace-related bullying and the consequences of these issues. So we know that this is one of the top things that we are facing and we are required to handle. And we know that as health and safety professionals, we are frontliners. So you might be directly exposed to these kind of situations, or you might be in a position where you need to handle these situations. So you need to be fully aware of these issues, and you need to make sure that you are aware as well of the risks, and you are aware of the management strategies, for these critical psychological issues. There is a great kind of emphasis on this well-being, psychological health, as it has a kind of a direct impact to the day-to-day things that we do these days as health and safety professionals and as frontliners and so forth. So we need to be aware, and we need to make sure that we are in the position, to handle these situations. There is a requirement as well that we need to capture these things into our risk assessments, because if we have that holistic risk assessment of the organizations, we need to ensure that we are aware of these risks and we are capturing them into our risk assessments. With that, I would like to introduce our presenter for this evening, Dr. Farah Ahmed, and I'm pretty sure that most of you knows Dr. Farah because she is very familiar to IOSH Qatar. She's helping us a lot, and I would like to thank her, for the big hand she's extending to us here in Qatar, especially in issues related to psychological health and well-being. Dr. Farah is a managing director and chief medical advisor at Noor Corporation Corporate Health in UAE. She's an occupational health and well-being consultant, and she's a family doctor, and she holds a master's degree from the University of Manchester in Occupational Medicine, and she holds a bachelor degree of medicine, MBBS, and she has more than 15 years of experience in occupational health and well-being. And most importantly, she has been handling issues that are related to psychological well-being and these things within this context of the world, like the GCC and so forth. She has been here in Qatar before, and now she's working in UAE. So she is pretty well aware of the setup within this part of the world. So with that, I would like to welcome Dr. Farah. So please join me to welcome her. Dr. Farah.
Thank you so much, Ahmad. It's always a pleasure to be here with you all, and to be virtually in Qatar is always good for me. So one day I will come by and visit, and we can all catch up then. And you're right, this is an important session for me on many levels. Because I've also faced these challenges in the workplace, and it's important for us to be able to recognize this issue with bullying in the workplace because it's not easily identified. So I would just share my screen with you. One second. All right, can you see? And it's okay. All right. Okay, great. So welcome everyone, and thanks for joining in. As I mentioned, this is an important topic for me uh, from personal experience and otherwise. It's important to really bring about the awareness. And with Mental Health Awareness Month this month, it's really pertinent for the season and the occasion. So just want to run through what I'll be discussing. So first of all, we need to understand what is bullying. I'm going to discuss some cases with you so that we can, have a little discussion and see what do you think or how you would interpret bullying. And then we will move into the effects of bullying, especially with regards to anxiety and mental health. And for us, what's really important, especially as occupational health and safety professionals, to be able to identify it. This is really important. And then strategies to prevent. And where do we fit in? What is our role in this? Yeah. So we'd start off with the definition. So by definition, workplace bullying is the repeated, unreasonable behavior directed to a staff member and creates a risk to their health and safety, or even the health and safety of others. So the key words to take home from this definition of workplace bullying would be repeated, unreasonable behavior, and then that risk to your health and safety. So these are the important concepts. Now, sometimes bullying can be very obvious, but saying that when you are in a position where you are the one, you are the victim in the situation, and sometimes I think on some aspects, the bully themselves, they don't necessarily recognize or they're not aware of what is actually happening in the situation. So that's why it's important as well for bystanders who are looking on to be able to pick up the key issues when bullying is concerned. So as I said, some are really obvious, where there's the name calling or there's the constant, putting people down, you know, making jokes sometimes as well, even though it's bad things that are saying. And then there's violence that can happen in the workplace. It could be repeated, and many other issues that fall under that realm of something, something is wrong. And sometimes it falls under the realm of being a legal issue as well, because it's against the law to harass someone or to be violent towards someone. So when it crosses those lines, again, we take a different action. But in other cases, bullying may not be as obvious. And this is where I would like to home in a little bit on, because when it comes to sometimes it's jokes, and so sometimes the bully themselves aren't fully aware of what they are doing or what impact they're having on the other person, what effects, what psychological effects they're causing, or how it's affecting the workplace culture itself. They're not fully aware. And the victim in this situation, sometimes it's in the form of emails, or sometimes it's in the form of someone changing your job role unexpectedly or putting unfair demands on you um, repeatedly. And that can be an issue as well. And that can also be bullying. So I want to bring a case up, and I want us to discuss it a little bit so that we can get a better idea of what bullying is. So this is a story about a teacher. We call her S. She's based in Australia, and she was a teacher in a private school for about 20 years. So that means she is mature. She has a lot of experience under her belt, And she was fine and she was enjoying her job until there was a change in management at the school. Now, with this new change in management came a new principal. So this is when her trouble started. And she made a case where she highlighted 3 incidences and put forward a case of workplace bullying. So I'll tell you the 3 instances. So the first one was that she was due for a performance review. Now, all of us, when we have to do a performance review, we're normally assessed by someone in our field. However, the new principal asked for her to be assessed by a business manager. And allegedly, this business manager, who had no experience in education, and the business manager also had a little run-in with her at some point. They exchanged words at some point, but then he became the person who would review her performance. So, of course, that brought some sense of anxiety in her and a question as to why, because she was the only teacher that this was happening to. So that was one case. The second incident was that when because she was working for so long, she was entitled to this long service leave. And she submitted her request for leave like we usually do. And sometimes, like usually happens, we don't get feedback on our leave. Is it approved? Is it not approved? And she kept checking with the secretary. Is it approved? Is it approved? Until one day, when she checked in with the secretary, the principal was also there. And he stood by her with his fist clenched and basically made us a strong statement to her saying, it's not approved as yet. I haven't done it as yet. And I don't have time for this just yet. And this is what led her to, again, more anxiety, more, I guess, confusion as to what is happening. Anyway, eventually she got her leave approved. So she went on leave and then she came back in. Now, after that length of time, as an occupational health doctor, sometimes when you're away from work for some length of time, yes, we can recommend for some sort of, just adjustment to work, giving you some little things to help you or some shadowing or something just to get you back familiar if you've been out for a long time. But for this teacher, what happened was that she was placed in an induction program that was geared for new teachers, even though she was not a new teacher. And her mentor in this program was a teacher who had significantly less experience than her, but she's been in it for 20 years. So as an experienced teacher, she felt very slighted. Obviously, she was upset. She was angry. Why was this happening to me? And that's why she brought the case forward. So I want to set it out to you now. If you can answer into the chat box, although I can't see the chat box, but Ahmed, you can help. 1 second, yeah. So is this a case of bullying? So just tell me yes, no, or I need more information. Maybe you can give me some feedback. What do you think?
So can you please put your answers in the chat room? No, the first answer is no. Second answer, yes, I would consider yes. Then another no. Another yes. 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 Yes.
So we have a few no's
yes.
and we have
yes.
a lot
so
of
we have
yeses.
2 no's and the rest are yeses.
Yeses, right. So my next question is why? So for those of you who said no, and those of you who said yes, maybe anybody is brave enough to come on and give me a reason. Why do you think no, or why do you think yes? Or maybe you can put it in the chat as well and Ahmed can read it out.
Yeah, if anyone would like to come on the discussion, you are more than willing to unmute and discuss your yes or no. Can we have any
No one brave enough?
There, there is there is an answer here. Joshua said yes because it's psychological torture. Alison is saying job performance issues are not necessarily bullying. Jay, okay. Catherine, can we allow to unmute, please? Jay.
Yeah, I've done that now.
Yes. So Jay, please.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, why I'm saying it's no, because it's not a repeated incident, and you have mentioned in the scenario that a recent management of change has happened. So maybe due to less resource, or whenever a management of change happens, what happens is that there will be an uncertainty in things where, like, due to resource lack, or most of the time during the management of change, those people who are more experienced, they will be seeing more new people coming to the department. This will make them more anxious, or what is happening, see what is happening around me, these kind of questions. So and in the scenario, I have never heard that she has been briefed or anything. So this makes her like feel alone in the department, or as a whole in the school. So that's why I say it's no.
Okay. And do you want to finish like the feedback and then you come, Dr. Farah? So we have Nancy. We have raised hand from Nancy. Nancy, please.
Hello, good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I would say no. I said no because it's not a repeated action. Bullying must be repeated over and over consistently.
All right,
Okay.
that's good.
Thank you.
Anybody who says yes?
Yeah, we have some comments. We have Karen. She's saying undermining her experience, the whole situation would be very uncomfortable for her, lessen her self-worth and feel unvalued.
Okay. So thank you so much for sharing. For somebody else, go
ahead. Let me just see. She was victimized. This is Omar. He said she was victimized by the principal and subjected to psychological pressure. I think yes, this is Bertrand. Yes, because she was in a state of psychological trauma after the bullying, which root cause was not taken in consideration, but rather her competence was put into question. Okay,
so
that's it.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you very much, everyone. And this is a healthy discussion, and this is where we need, we really need the information at this stage to figure out, is this a case of bullying or not, right? And this is where it becomes tricky, because not all cases are obvious. And even worse is that we're just outsiders looking in. But what happens with the victim themselves, they're not always even able to identify what is happening to them until a long time has passed, when the behavior really goes on beyond and causes significant psychological trauma. And that's when they realize that something is not right. So in this particular case, it was actually ruled as workplace bullying. And that was for a few reasons. So one second. So one, it was because it actually caused psychological injury to her. She was fine and okay before, until she developed significant anxiety and panic because of these, because of what she felt was targeted towards her. Now, a few people mentioned that was not recurrent, but these were 3 separate incidences that she reported over time, which means that this is recurrent. And the thing is, it's so tricky that if we take each in isolation, as Jay mentioned and Nancy mentioned, that these could be just because of the managerial problem, right? There's a new management, there's different circumstances, and we could probably want to justify why this has happened. But these were recurrent, viewed as recurrent events. So this is why it was labeled as workplace bullying, along with the behavior being unreasonable. And how they judged that was that she was the only teacher that this all three happened to, whereas other teachers who went through the same process and same issues, they didn't face these difficulties. So this is what the case was based on. But as I said, it's a difficult situation, and every point of view needs to be examined closely. So the commission went ahead and deemed it as a case of workplace bullying. So I want to move on a little bit more to discuss those effects on the personal effects of bullying on the victim themselves. And we start off with the mental health. So mental health is basically anything that affects our thoughts, our feelings, our behavior. And when you put in these types of situations, it can make us feel angry. We feel more vulnerable, meaning that we know that we are, there's a possible attack coming towards us. So it really puts us in that sense of defense. We are sometimes in shock. We could even deny that this is happening, wondering what is going on. It messes with our self-confidence, and it puts us in a very isolated feeling, because we're not able to communicate what we are feeling or what we're experiencing on another level to anyone else. So that really socially isolates us in the workplace, because we're not able to speak about what's really bothering us. Then there are the physical effects. So, and again, mental health and physical health go hand in hand. And this affects sleep. It can affect your appetite. And of course, if these are affected, it affects your mental health, as I just said, and it causes more problems. Then other things that happen is that what we call the psychosomatic symptoms. So that means that's when we are under so much stress, or our body, our mental health is not doing so well, and our body manifests now what it is we're feeling. So the most common tends to be headaches, and your stomach aches or stomach problems tend to come about because of this significant amount of stress. And we come back to the effects of the anxiety and the panic that people feel. And just from my personal experience of my case of bullying, which I didn't even recognize what was happening to me, is only when I developed an anxiety towards opening emails. That's when I realized something is not right here. And, to have that effect that even lasted with me for a few years on, that was significant enough to affect you. So this is what happens. And this is a long-term effect unless we learn how to help ourselves in these situations and how to cope, how to manage better. It affects our family life, causes family stress. It will affect our concentration. Our mood is affected, and eventually our productivity. We're not going to work as well as we used to work before. Cursor just went off. So the effects of bullying at work. So effects of bullying at work. So when we look at it from a different angle now, we're looking at it as the workplace or the work environment. How is it affected? And it's affected through absenteeism rates, turnover rates. So people would leave because they're not going to stay in a culture that is toxic or that is encourages bullying. There's also increases in injuries and accidents because, again, people do not feel safe in their job. They're not able to perform at their best. Again, as we said, it affects your productivity and it causes stress, not only to the individual, but to everybody else in the organization would feel that level of stress. And that leads to the effect on the workplace culture. And for the company, they should be worried about that because it also affects their corporate image. So now as HSE professionals, what we want to take a look at, or if we are faced in this situation, we need to be able to identify what are the vulnerable workers, or who are the vulnerable workers, or the vulnerable types of situations. And you have to look at the person first. So granted, there's no clear definition. If you look at the research, there's lots of varying findings in terms of who is targeted or who is more vulnerable than others. But there's some general trends that we could follow, and we have to look at, we start with the person themselves. And now with bullying, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a superior who's bullying a subordinate. It could be the other way around, or it can be a colleague, it can be at any level of the organization. So it doesn't have to be in one direction downwards. And the people who tend to be victims of bullying tends to be the ones who are, maybe part-time workers, or who are the minority group, or you're working, late shifts or night shifts, or you're coming in as a temporary worker. These types of people who are not there regularly will tend to be the victims of bullying. And when we look at the bully themselves, what research shows is that authoritative type of relationship also could be a factor that leads to workplace bullying. The other aspect is the role of the actual role of the job. And this is where, again, I've spoken here already about the stress in the workplace. And when we come back to that, that is also significant in terms of trying to identify who those are vulnerable workplace, or that vulnerable role. And that falls under if someone has heavy job demands, or their job role is just not clear. Nobody's specific in terms of what they're supposed to do. They're not clear on that. All these aspects, lack of resources and lack of support, all these things are tied to not having or creating that culture where bullying can happen. So that's important to look at in the rule. And then the other aspect, this is what creates the environment where that whole culture of not being able to perform at your best. Or if you look at it from an outsider looking in, and you're seeing a colleague being bullied and nobody is listening or nothing is happening, and it affects the environment. And then even in some industries, bullying is sort of a natural occurrence, and that should not be so at any level. And that happens in healthcare, and that's what we face. We have lost a colleague early on in internship because of bullying. He committed suicide, and the response by some of the faculty was that this is a tough field. You have to be tough in order to survive, but that's no excuse to allow this type of behavior. And we need to be careful about the types of environment. Another sector that faces this a lot is the security sector, and this is where to be strong, that feeling of being strong, that you need to have that in order to perform, that causes a problem as well. So strategies now, what do I do? If I am the victim, how do I approach this situation? One is that you have to speak up, but speak up means that you have to do it in a way that protects you, not in a way that will cause you more harm. And it's really important when you speak up that you have a witness present. So that requires patience and time, and we'll go through how to work out that. Another key piece of advice is that keep a diary, keep a logbook, record dates, record times, record the details of the incident. This is all important to build your case. The other bit is to keep your records. So whether it's emails, letters, memos, or even if it's just a text message or recurrent text messages to say, don't come in today, come in at this time, or if it's like you have just this work just came up and you have to get it done by this time, and it's a recurrent thing, save those text messages, because it's important to keep that track of what's happening and how many times this has been happening to you compared to what's happening to everybody else. It's important as well, if your company has a policy on bullying, follow the policy. You have to report along the lines of the policy, and this is what's recommended. What's not recommended is retaliation. So as I said before, yes, it's important to speak up, but don't retaliate. It will escalate to another level and something that will be very difficult for you to control. So how do you control yourself when you're ready to respond, or whatever it is that you face, or which you feel in the moment? So we use the stop technique to help us. And this is good for anything. This is good for anger management. It's good for just being able to help us to be aware of what we feel. And that self-awareness is what will help us. So the S in stop is for stop, to stop or pause. Just stop for the moment when you feel that anxiety level goes up or that those emotions go up. Stop. T, take a deep breath. O, observe. What you're observing is not just what's happening around you, but you're going to observe what's happening inside of you. How am I feeling? What triggered this? What's happening? Am I in the right position to respond? And this is where we have to then P, which is proceed with that better self-awareness, or proceed with a sense of knowledge rather than being a reaction or reactive feeling, because that's what will escalate the problem. So when it comes now to the workplace, because of course I always do the personal and the workplace. So when it comes to the workplace strategies now, this is where we come in. We need to help our companies develop clear company-wide policies on bullying. We need to educate and raise awareness. It's really important that people are aware about the policy, how to approach, what they need to do, and sort of create that culture of reporting, that it's okay if you see a problem to come up and speak up and say what's happening. And that's where support in every claim is important, because if we say, no, this is just how it is, we have a million excuses as to why this is happening, and the victim is not feeling as though they're being heard, that's a problem, because then it will prevent others from wanting to speak up if something is really happening in the workplace. And it's important as well to provide bullies with training, victims with support. It's important to help on both sides of the spectrum, not just to cast one out if there's a problem. And if it's one message I want you to take home, is to speak out. We need to feel, understand the urgency and the necessity in speaking out when we see something wrong happening. We need to be able to say it and just continue raising the awareness, because this is very common. And we can't, it's not a good thing for any organization or even for ourselves to see something happening and not do something about it. Now, as occupational health and safety professionals, we really important in terms of helping to identify when we see that it's a problem, or if someone comes to report a problem to us, we have to be able to analyze it, as we mentioned before. And we analyze it in terms of helping identify the vulnerable people, vulnerable roles, vulnerable environments. We are here to advise on policy. If there's an existing policy or we need to update a policy, this is where we're here to help. We also need to advise employees and the employers about the occurrence. If we see it happening, it's important because it is a risk to safety, health, and well-being. We can take part in promoting anti-bullying policies and awareness campaigns. And also remember, we have a legal obligation to advise on when this gets out of hand. If it's a case of, say, a legal, in the UK, we would use the term harassment, if it falls under that category where someone is being bullied and victimized because of their age or their gender or their ethnicity, whatever it is. So it becomes a legal issue. And we need to be aware when it's the time to call the police or when there's a significant problem. Then remember as well, our role is not to resolve the matter. We're just here to provide support, but our actions is to provide the support and raise the awareness, identify the risks. So just closing up here, the important take-home reminders. One is that we have to remember that an employer's duty is to provide that safe working environment And we are here to prevent any work-related injuries and illnesses. That's what our role is. We have to identify that bullying is a psychological hazard. And we come back to understanding the differences between what is reasonable and what is unreasonable. And that's where the debate would always come in. We need to figure out what is reasonable behavior versus unreasonable behavior. And then we also should be able to advise on what is lawful versus unlawful. And that's where our realm falls in. To close, I end with the quote, nothing will kill an employee faster than when see you tolerating a bad one. And this is, this is significant. So tell me, thanks so much for listening. I'm happy to take any questions or any stories anybody would like to share, anything at all. I'm here. Okay, thanks for listening.
Thanks, Doc. Thanks, everyone, for participating in this. Doc, we've got a few questions for you. One of them is, why do people include the term repeated when they're talking of unwanted behaviors? Because someone is saying that this almost advocates that this is not the first time. So why is that term repeatedly used when there are examples of unwanted behaviors being classified as bullying?
Exactly, and that's an excellent question, and that comes to the fact. So we have the definitions of harassment. So sometimes you can have an isolated case that is bad, and we need to get it dealt with, right? But when it comes to the other aspects of it, for example, say you're being bullied via email, or you're being victimized in some way that's not so obvious. You see, just as in the case example that I gave, the first thing that happened was that she was put to a business manager for a performance review, right? Now, isolated, we can look at it and say, maybe there was a business need for this to happen. Maybe there were not enough staff. Maybe, there was some situation. But the mere fact that there were 3 other occurrences, and I get where you're coming from, it shouldn't escalate that far. But the mere fact that it's recurrent gives that bullying, that concept, that definite, it fits the definition. But harassment, so you can have a single off episode, even if it's a violent situation or something that's wrong, you can still raise an issue, you can still raise it as a problem, but it may not be termed bullying, because bullying is a specific recurrent issue that you're being targeted over time. I hope that answers the question. I hope that helps.
Yeah, thanks, Doc. And then there's a second question. Can anxiety lead to long-lasting mental condition if not controlled at the earlier stage?
Yeah, so just like with any mental health concern, not just anxiety, depression, and many other, if any even a health condition, if you have chest pains and you don't get it sorted, any condition that you have over a long period of time without handling it, there will be consequences. There will be long-term consequences, and it will also be harder for you to recover. So it's always better, if you know you're having a problem, seek help earlier. That's where your chances of recovery would be best.
Absolutely, absolutely. There's a third question from one of the participants. It says, at what point does suicide tendency becomes eminent or visible in a victim? And what are the approaches to raise awareness to the management to intervene in such a situation?
So that's a really good question. The thing is, though, with suicide, it's unless you are even when you're close to someone, you may not be able to tell the signs that something is wrong. And this is where that the isolation comes from, because the person feels that they cannot communicate what they're going through with anyone. So the signs are very hard to tell. Some of it will include that you can observe, as an outsider, you can observe that the person has isolated themselves, they've pulled themselves away, they're not doing the things that they normally would like to do. Maybe they made a suggestion or a joke in a way that, raise an alarm bell, or their approach to work or their approach to life all of a sudden has changed. There's so many signs you can look for. However, it's not always quite obvious. You would not necessarily know that someone is suffering. Even your close people, you might not know that they're really suffering if they're not able to feel comfortable enough to open up with you. To say, was this a two-part question or was this the one part?
It was actually a two-part question.
Yeah. What was the second part? Yeah,
the
sorry.
second part was, what are the approaches to raise awareness to the management to intervene in such a situation?
Right. So the problem again with the world is that it's very reactionary. So only when the event happens, then everybody wants to do something about it. So it becomes very difficult, yes, unless, of course, so for me as an occupational health doctor, or especially working in the workplace, or dealing with the workplace environment, that's where we would come in and risk assess the mental health or the physical health, or we look through your sickness records, we look through, and just basically try to figure out what are the challenges your employees are facing. So when we're able to risk assess the situation, we could give management data that this is what's happening in your workplace. This is where the problems are starting. And then we can help raise awareness as to what we can do to prevent problems, because we sort of know where it would go if we know what the starting point is. But the problem with most organizations is that they have no clue where their organization lies. And when you don't know, you're just acting from a place of either or just a reaction to a situation, or you are in a position to, just do something randomly without really knowing what it is your organization needs. So when you want to raise awareness, my advice would be to conduct proper risk assessments and then determine what the problem areas are, and then you tackle it from there. And that's where you help on that side of awareness from a place of data and from knowledge.
Okay, then we've got a few more questions, and I think we will try to club a few of them because we might be running out of time. One of it is, in most cases, it is not repeatedly done, but sometimes a single crosstalk may lead to some hypertensive situation, and some cycle might indulge in an unsafe behavior at work. I'm not sure if this is a comment or a statement, but I think the doctor has clarified this. We've got situations like this, and we expect people to step in and notify the management as quickly as possible. Now, there's another question which comes like this: what is the focus? Who is the focus of bullying counseling? What are the ideal outcomes when bullying or abuse is proven through evidence from senior to subordinate?
From senior to subordinate. So if it's if the case has been fully investigated, and then you've come up with that conclusion that it is a case of bullying, then again, it's up to the organization and the policy. And you see, for me, every organization is different. And for me, as if you take the people as individuals, and then you do further follow-ups with them to understand where they're coming from. And this is where occupational health can help as well. When, even for the bully themselves, when they undergo an evaluation, psychological evaluation, or some effort is put into their behavior. Why are they behaving like this, or what's happening in the background? And we're able to help them. For me, a favorable outcome would be that both parties, the victim and the bully, are helped in this situation. For me, that would be ideal. That does not happen in real life. Most times, if the bully is classified as a bully, they may be asked to leave their job, and who knows if they would ever get help or support to overcome whatever is making them behave in this way. the victim themselves could be awarded money, compensation because of what they faced. That gives, I guess, some level of, you know, some sort of resolution on some level, but you still have to work through all that psychological trauma that you've been through to recover properly. So for me, both parties ideally should be helped in this situation. I hope that answers the question.
Absolutely. Now, there are a couple of other questions again that ties into this. I think one of it goes like this. How to deal with someone who do bully to others, although they are in the same position, in the same organization.
Sorry, you can repeat
No,
that?
how to deal with someone who is a bully
Mhm.
when he's on the same position, in the same organization with the people he's bullying.
Right. So this is, I had mentioned before, for one is that you really need to keep a proper record, because again, bullying, if you want to make a case of bullying, that's a separate case. If you want to make a case that, you know, this person is just victimizing you, or they are, you know, not necessarily bullying you, but they are, you know, they're making your life difficult and their behavior is unreasonable, you can still raise that. But if you want to make a bullying case, definitely keep a proper record of everything that's happening, because it's the pattern of behavior is what would give or lend to that concept of bullying. For any behavior that's not proper, companies should have lines to follow, some sort of guidelines. How do you report? Usually you would report to whoever is your senior, explain that this person at our level or my level is, this has been happening, and you report it up. If your line manager is unable to deal with the situation, HR is supposed to be able to help. Health and safety, if your organization has occupational health, you know, all these are different avenues depending on what the organization has available. So it's really just to follow the policy to be able to report along the lines that it's meant to be reported. And if you're still not getting what you need, my advice is always to keep going higher until somebody hears the case that you have, and you should have evidence though to back it up, whether it's an eyewitness, whether it's reports, whether it's emails, whatever it is. You should have some sort of evidence that this has happened.
Thanks, Doc. I think there are a couple of other questions that are kind of similar to this. There's one that someone was asking, what if the bully is protected by the management? And there's another question again, that what if in an organization, bullying is considered as normal? I think it ties similar to what you have just answered. So I think we'll skip on this. Now, there are also a couple of other questions like, how can we register bullying where the boss uses smart techniques, like not allowing to attend to silly excuses? I think this is also the same thing. And there's another question, if the party being bullied is not speaking out, then how can the situation be addressed?
Sorry, say that again.
If the person being bullied is not speaking out, it's silent,
Right.
then how can the situation be addressed?
So this is the thing. So again, if you are the bystander, if you know that this is happening, then that's why I say speak out. You should go to whoever it is, again, in the policy, who is there to report to. If there's no policy, then you speak to the person's line manager, or speak to whoever is in charge, or HR as well, to be able to report what's happening. And that's if the bully is not, if the victim is not coming forward, and say they have you in confidence and you're not allowed to say anything. Although for us, I mean, as medical people, we know once somebody's life is in danger or something is wrong, you have to break confidentiality, because you can't put somebody else at risk, or put a life at risk. It's not ethical. You know, that rule of confidentiality goes out when someone is in actual danger. So it really depends on the situation, and each one, you know, each situation has to is different, but it's about speaking out. If nobody does it, and if that culture is not, if people aren't being heard, then again, you look at the turnover rates, right? So people would leave. Nobody is going to stay somewhere and, you know, live with this for long, right? There would come a point where it's like, this is enough, I have to leave. And at least I would hope so, rather than take another option that we don't want, right? So leave if you have to. Nothing is worse, there's a quote going around. If your job is bad when your mental health, leave. There's nothing worth it, right? So your job is not worth your mental health. So yeah, hope that helps.
Okay, and then we'll take one last question, and I think there are a couple of hands that have been raised. I think they just might want to chip in something. We might only take one person, and then we'll call it for the day. But let's take the last question. It comes like this: can bullying be seen only from the physical perspective, or there are other means of bullying, like sending emails, chat messages, which could also be classified as bullying?
Yes. So as I mentioned, all those just need to you have to keep the record, because you can be bullied in many different ways. Now with social media as well, the internet, this goes even beyond like just the cyberbullying and all these things that happen. So it can be in any form. It's just to be able to document and to keep a record of what's happening. So save the text messages, save the emails, save everything, so that when you put your case forward, you have your evidence available.
Thanks, Doc. And then we'll take one comment from one of the participants, Mohammed Kazim. You can unmute and let's hear what you have to say about this. I think you've got a comment here. Yes, you can unmute yourself.
Yeah, hello. Can you hear me, Mr. Farah?
Yes.
Assalamu alaikum.
Yes.
Yeah, good
Yes, we
evening
can.
to everyone. I'm sorry, but actually it's been covered because I'm working as a HSC professional in supply chain professional. I'm working with IDNOC sometime in different sectors. I work also in Qatar or SGTL. And I have experienced a lot of cases actually like stereotyping, bullying. And in some cases, it depends actually. It varies from situation to situation. It depends upon the organization, internal policy, internal commitments from top managements. And also, again, it's lead toward the HR team. Sometimes you're facing the problem from your HR team, which are not competent enough, to give you a proper feedback. Sometimes you're facing a problem from your frontline manager. As recently, I'm being on at NOC sulfur station on shores, and my own safety managers, actually bullying depends, sometime a crosstalk and single crosstalk may disturb the person who is actually working inside a confined space with a really limited resources and the list of stuff, because it's workers, it depends, and the extreme heats, a situation may lead toward a worse situation. Yeah, and that case is if you just may report to a line manager regarding a certain situation with the proper feedback. But again, in a very limited period of a shutdown period, they are not giving you a proper feedback just because of the limitation of the resources and some other factor keep in mind. So in that case, even if you put it forward to your project manager, the one who is responsible for leading the whole project, he will just remain silent.
Mohammed, I think can you please mute, because we've got some echo from your side. But I think we got your point clearly. So can you just summarize, because we've got a short time with Dr. Farah now. Please summarize.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's okay. Yeah, I just got all of the answers. It was really a nice presentation, and I got most of the answers. So it's really a wonderful session. Thank you.
Thank you. Back to Doc, please.
Yeah.
Doc, you have something to say on this?
Yeah, but I think I covered most of this before. When you're dealing with managers who are not acknowledging, and then there's the difficulty in this situation, and that's why sometimes it's not best to handle it while you're in the situation. You should wait until afterwards, and then you raise it in a manner that would be more productive, that would be more effective for you and for everyone else involved. So, dealing with something at hand isn't necessarily what's urgent. What's urgent at that time would be to help your personal composure, or how you manage or how you cope in the situation. That would be more important at the point in time. But in terms of dealing with the entire picture, sometimes it's better to just wait until you can address it in the most effective manner, with witnesses and with backup support, with you're going with everything that you have in order to make your case as best and as strong as you can make it. Yeah.
Thanks, Doc. And I do apologize for the other participants who dropped in questions in the chat box. Unfortunately, we've got a limited time. We'll take your questions and we'll try to pass it across to Dr. Farah later, and we'll get back to you on the answers. This is kind of a sensitive topic, and I do appreciate that we've got effective participation from all of you. So now over back to Ahmed Idrisi for the wrap up of this. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Valentine. Thank you, Dr. Farah, for this very interesting presentation. The time is definitely not enough for this topic, to be addressed, in one session. However, we just want to highlight the most kind of important things on that. And definitely we are going to get back to you with more kind of sessions. And I think one of the topics that has already been discussed here that might need a separate session is this psychological risk assessment, how to conduct these psychological risk assessment, how to incorporate these issues into our risk assessments, and what are the controls that we need to put in place, to ensure that we are kind of controlling the issues. I have one announcement that I would like to make, which is related to the next session next week. Next week we are going to have our AGM, the annual general meeting, and it's going to be a very important meeting that will be attended by the president of IOSH. So please make sure that you register for that event and make sure that you attend this event. And we are in the process of resuming our face-to-face. So maybe very soon you will hear good news that we will meet face-to-face here in Qatar, and I hope that we can meet each one of you, and then we discuss things closely. So with that, I would like to thank you very much for joining us. As mentioned by Valentine, questions will be answered, and then we will forward the answers to you. Thank you, Catherine, for the support, and take care. Have a very good evening, and see you on the 18th on the AGM. Thank you very much. Thank you.